Hello there and welcome to Cansanity. Today is salsa day, and for me it's day 2 of making salsa. The first day I made my mild salsa, which I have over here, and today I'm making my medium to hot salsa. Now, regardless of whether I'm making mild salsa or medium salsa, I always like to use poblano peppers. It's my absolute favorite pepper to use in salsa because it has a smoky flavor with a little bit of heat. So for my mild salsa, what I would do for the mild pepper in the recipe is I would use a combination of poblanos and red bell peppers. But for today, because I'm doing my medium to hot salsa, I'm just going to use the poblanos for my mild pepper. For the hot pepper in the recipe, I will use jalapenos for the mild salsa. And so that's what I use, my own homegrown jalapenos for my mild salsa. And for my medium to hot salsa, I'll use a combination of serrano peppers and habaneros. Now, you only need 1/3 of a cup of chopped hot peppers for this recipe. So if you're out there at the market and you're thinking, how many peppers do I need to make my salsa? You only need about maybe 4, maybe 5, and 1 habanero to make medium hot salsa for one batch of this recipe. So keep that in mind. You don't need to buy a half a bushel of hot peppers to make salsa. You really only need a small amount in order to add heat to your salsa. Now, I also have my tomatoes here, and here's a half a bushel and another half a bushel. And so when I'm making my salsa, I like to streamline the process, and so I do a bushel at a time. It takes me all day, but once that day is done, that batch of salsa is done. And so now I like to use Roma tomatoes because Romas are nice and firm. They stand up well to blanching and peeling, and inside the flesh is a nice firm texture, and it holds up well to chopping and to blanching, and so it's perfect for making chunky salsa, which is the type of salsa that I like to make. And so I'm just going to wash up, and then I'm going to start preparing the vegetables and show you how I do that. Okay, so I'm just getting my tomatoes ready, and I just give them a rinse to get the dust off. And then you have to score the blossom end of the tomato. So that's the stem end, and that's the blossom end. So all you have to do is put an X on the blossom end, and then they're ready to go in boiling water to blanch. Okay, so I have a 16-liter pot on my stove, filled about 2/3 of the way full. If you're just doing one batch, you only need to fill it half full. But because I'm doing 4 batches of this recipe, and I'm going to blanch all my tomatoes at once, and so what you want is a little bit more volume of water in here, because every time you add some tomatoes, it's going to cool that water a little bit. So I generally go about 2/3 full if I'm going to do 4 batches in a row. So it's at already a boil, and then you're going to add about maybe 5 pounds of tomatoes at a time, and then set your timer for 45 seconds is enough. And just let that boil, and then once that timer goes off, then we're going to put them in ice water. And you want to cool the tomatoes off quickly because you are blanching them so that you can remove the peels, but you don't want the flesh inside to keep cooking. So that's why you want to put them in ice water after the timer goes off. So I have a scoop that I use to get my tomatoes out. I have 10 seconds left on my timer, and when that timer goes off, then I'm going to scoop them out, and we're going to put them in the ice water, which is actually going to happen in about 4 seconds, so we might as well just continue on. My timer's off, and so now I'll just use my scoop and my tomatoes out of the hot water, my one batch, and then we're going to go over to the ice water and dump that in the ice water. Okay, so I'm just going to dump the tomatoes in the ice water and swirl that around. You only really need that for that to stay in there for 60 seconds. So while those are cooling, then I'll take another bowl of my tomatoes and I'll dump them into the pot. So all my whole entire bushel of tomatoes has been scored, ready to go in bowls. And so I just, while my tomatoes are in the hot water, then I have some cooling, and now these are ready to come out, so I'll just take them out, and the next batch will be ready soon to go into the ice water. So by doing a whole bushel at once, you can see how you're not wasting very much water because you're using the same hot water to blanch your tomatoes. You can use the same ice water. I'll have to add some more ice halfway through. So I use about one bought bag of ice to do a whole bushel of tomatoes. So my timer is about to go off, and so I'll put the next batch in and then I'll show you what it all looks like. Okay, so to peel the tomatoes, they've already been blanched and then shocked in the cold water, and so to peel them, what you're going to do is you're just going to take a little part of the blossom end there that you cut and just pull the peel down. Now I pull the peels off and then I just put them in one bowl, and then I put the cored piece and any extra flesh in another bowl, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So just take that off. That comes off very easy, and then there's your stem end. So I'll take a thin slice off the stem end and I'll throw that in the bowl, and then I'll cut the tomato in half. And now to core them, it's very simple. You just take your knife and cut it on an angle like that, and then just take your hand and just pull that core right out and stick it in that bowl. Take out any seeds. If you don't get them all, that's okay, and so then that's a cored tomato. Now you're going to use, see how nice those romas are for the thickness of the flesh, and so that's going to make a nice chunky salsa, and it's nice and firm still, which is the way I like it for salsa. So then this will be, you'll chop this part up in medium dice, and you'll want to measure out 14 cups for each batch that you're going to make of salsa. So I'm going to continue on and core and seed and peel all of my tomatoes, and then I'll show you what it looks like for straining. Now when I do a whole bushel of tomatoes, I am very lucky. My husband joins in on the party and helps me peel and stem and prepare the salsa. So one of us will be peeling, and then the other one will be coring and taking out the seeds, and so then that just makes it very efficient so that we can get this all done quickly. And you're going to have your 14 cups set over a colander over a bowl, and you want to let it drip for 30 minutes. So it's good to have someone doing one part and then another person doing the next part, and that way you have you can be very efficient on your timing for straining your tomatoes and cooking your tomatoes. But we'll talk more about that when we get to that stage. Right now we're just going to I'm going to get to the coring and the seeding and peeling of the tomatoes, and we'll pick up the video at the next part. Okay, so I'm chopping away. My husband's still peeling some of the tomatoes, and we kind of get things going. We get the draining going of some of the tomatoes, and we get the cooking going on some of the other tomatoes, and we keep peeling and chopping. So I've already chopped another 4 cups of tomatoes, and I just want to show you, you don't have to be super precise about chopping your tomatoes. I like in this salsa, you want thick chunks, and so some might be a little thinner. And remember, you're going to cook this, so the size of the dice is going to shrink a little bit because you're going to cook it. So don't worry if it's a little too chunky. So I just wanted to show you that, you know, that's how I would chop my tomatoes, and then I just use my measuring cup to measure off my, this is a 4-cup measure, and so I dump that, do 3 of those, and then another 2, and that's my 14 cups. Okay, I have one batch already cooking on the first cook on the stove, and then this one's dripping. I just wanted to show you the size of the strainer that I use, and then it's a fine mesh strainer, and so that's got my 14 cups of tomatoes in there, and I put it over a large pot, and then I collect the juice. I'm just going to put this over here collect the juice in a pot, and then I actually pour it into my discard of my cores that and my seeds. So I pour that in there, and I save that because I'll tell you at the end what I do with that. So, again, this is the colander. I have it set over my large pot, and that's going to drain, drip for 30 minutes before you get to cook it. Okay, so I just wanted to show you what the first cook of the tomatoes looks like. So you're cooking the tomatoes for an hour to 70 minutes, because you want to evaporate off some of that liquid, because you want to have like a thick salsa. And so this has been on for 30 minutes already, and I have my gas element on number 4, so and it's still simmering quite well. So you wouldn't want to go too higher, because especially once you get to this point, you don't want it to stick to the bottom of the pot. So watch it carefully after half of the cook, and I bring it up to a boil, then I bring it down to just to simmer, and I stir it too. I make sure that I stir it frequently so that it doesn't stick to the bottom. So this one has another 30 minutes to go. And now this is an 8-liter pot. I have several pots, several 8 liters, several several pots that are like 10 and 12 liters. If you have 8-liter pots for this step, this is nice because it'll evaporate more liquid if you have a shallower pot. And so I do 4 batches at a time, and so I do have a 12-liter that I use, but it wouldn't evaporate at the same rate as the 8-liter. So I first use my 2 8-liter pots to simmer down my tomatoes for that first cook. Okay, so this is halfway through the cook on the second batch of salsa that I'll be making using the tomatoes for the second batch. This one was finished, so I just want you to see the volume. Like, it started out here when it was full, then it's reduced quite a bit here already, just having cooked 30 minutes. And then this is after 60 minutes. And so don't worry, this might look like, oh, I'm not going to get a lot of salsa, but you can add onions and peppers and all kinds of other stuff in here, and the vinegar, so you'll get your 5 pints once you add all of that in. Now, I like to use this 8-liter pot for reducing, because like I said, it's better for evaporation if it's not very deep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scoop this out, and I'm going to put that in one of my bigger pots just to set aside, because I like to, once I get my canning pot rolling, the boiling, getting to a rolling boil, I like to just do one batch after another. So I get this stage done first, where I get that first cook done. And so I'm just going to put this aside and put the lid on, and I'm going to continue with my other 3 batches. So I'm getting 5 batches of salsa out of this 1 bushel of tomatoes. So I'm going to dump that out, give this a wash, and then I'm going to put my next batch in this pot and get that started on the stove. Okay, so I just want to show you how I chop up my peppers. Always wear gloves. I have some disposable gloves here that I'm going to use. And I'm doing 5 batches of this recipe, so I like to chop all the peppers all at once, and I have 5 bowls lined up over here, and just put them in the bowls. That way I'm just not taking off my gloves and touching other things, and so I just use 1 pair of gloves then. So I have my 1 cup here, because I'm going to need to measure out 3 cups of chopped poblano. And then I have my 1/3 cup here where I'm going to use my serranos and my habaneros, and I'm going to get my 1/3 cup of that. So I'll start with the poblanos. So the poblanos, the way I cut them up is I just cut them down the center like that, and then take out the core and the seeds, and then it's just medium dice, and like the wall is thin compared to a bell pepper, but the flavor is amazing. So what I do is I just slice it like that, and for this I would be a little bit more precise in the size that I'm going to chop, because it's got a little bit of that smoky heat, and so you don't want to have big chunks of this, but medium size is good. So I'll just chop that up. I don't really worry about if there's a few seeds in there, because again, this is going to be a medium hot salsa, and so that's how I would chop up my poblano. And so I would just keep doing that until I get 3 cups. And then for the serrano, I would just cut off the end like that, and I like to take the seeds out of the serranos because they're hotter than a jalapeno, and so I don't put the seeds in because I like the flavor of the habanero. That flavor is even, the habanero is hotter than the serrano, but a different type of flavor. So I don't want to add the heat with the seeds, so I take the seeds out. If you want to leave the seeds in, you can, but I take the seeds out. And so then if there's just a few seeds in there, that's okay. Now make sure you're careful not to cut your glove, because you don't want to get any of these oils on your skin, because it will burn. You'll get a chemical burn. And if you do happen to get a hole in your glove, don't be brave, go get another pair of gloves, because it's just not worth having. Especially if you're making 5 batches of salsa, you don't want your hands to be burning the whole time you're trying to finish it up. So, and then for the serranos or jalapenos or my hot peppers, I cut them fine. You don't want a big piece of hot pepper in your salsa. So these peppers I cut fine. I mean, there might be the occasional bit when you get to the end that is chunky, but you can always run your knife through again just to chop it up a little bit finer. Okay, and then I would put that in here, and you see that was 1 serrano, and you can see how it doesn't take very much for very many hot peppers to fill up a 1/3. So I'll take my habanero, and I'll cut that up too. And it's a very thin-walled pepper as well, but lots of flavor, lots of heat. But I just love the flavor of habaneros. I think habaneros are my favorite hot pepper. And so then I would, again, you want that to be thin. So you don't want big chunks of that pepper in your salsa. So you cut that like that, and then I would just run my knife over there and cut that thin. And if you get a few seeds in, that's okay. So I'd keep going until I have 1/3 cup, and then 3 cups of the poblanos, and then I'd put that in my 1 bowl, and then I'd move on and I'd fill up the rest of the bowls until I have all my peppers chopped for all 5 of my batches of salsa. Okay, so all of my tomatoes have been cooked down. I have all my pots lined up there, and I'll start now cooking, adding the rest of the ingredients to the tomatoes, and then I've already warmed up my canning pot. My jars are already sterile. I put them in my oven at 225 with the rings for 10 minutes, and so they're already sterile. Now I just have to start cooking my salsa. So once you add all the rest of the ingredients to your tomatoes, it's only a 10-minute cook, and so that's why you want to have all the rest of your jars sterile and ready to go, and you want your boiling water canner, you want it to be hot, already boiling. And so once this gets down to about 5 minutes, to within 5 minutes of the remaining of the cook, then I'll turn the boiling water canner back on, and so that then I can start just, when I put the jars into the boiling water canner, then I can add another pot to the stove, and that's how I end up getting everything cooked really quickly and streamline everything. So I have 5 bowls here, and so in all of my bowls are my peppers, my garlic, my onion, and so now I'm going to add, and my hot peppers. So I'm going to add 1 bowl to each pot as I'm making it. So I'll dump that in, and I chopped the onions medium dice, and I minced the garlic. And so I like, this is a chunky salsa, so you want to see chunks of onion in your salsa, so you can see what that looks like right there. So that's all my veg. Now I'm going to add my 1/3 of a cup of tomato paste, and that would be about half of one of these cans. So but I did measure it out, so I'll just add my tomato paste. And I have to be honest, sometimes I've not had tomato paste in the house and I've left it out. It's worth having the tomato paste because it just adds a concentrated tomato flavor. So yeah, don't leave it out if you're picking up all the ingredients. Make sure you pick up the tomato paste. It certainly can be made, and you can. The salsa is good. It's just better with 1/3 of a cup of the tomato paste. So then you're going to add a teaspoon of ground black pepper, and you can either add a teaspoon of regular table salt or a teaspoon and a half of kosher salt. So I'm just going to add the teaspoon of table salt, and then you want to measure out 1 cup of vinegar, and it has to be at the 5% or higher acidity. And so if you're going to err on more than less, go a little more, because this is what helps make your salsa shelf stable. So you want to have at least a cup of vinegar. So I'm going to add that, and then I'm going to stir that up. And the only other ingredient that I need to add are 2 things. You're going to add a tablespoon of sugar, and you know that's not bad. A tablespoon of sugar for 5 pints of salsa. That's, you know, not a lot of sugar that you're adding, but the sugar helps balance the acidity in the salsa, so make sure you do add the 1 tablespoon of sugar. And then the last ingredient that we need to add is the chopped cilantro. So I'm just going to move this over to my stove, and now I have my cilantro in a 8-cup measuring cup. And what I do is I buy my cilantro, if I don't have it growing in my garden, I buy my cilantro the day before I'm going to make my salsa, and don't put it in the fridge. Put it in a jar with water, and then put a bag over top of it. You can see it kind of creates a little greenhouse effect. And honestly, if you do this, you can keep the cilantro good on your counter for 3 or 4 or 5 days. Just make sure that you change out the water every day. So then, as you can see, it's nice and bright. And I did just buy this yesterday. And so now what I like to do is there's I think 3 bunches in here. I just take scissors and I just cut off the stems, and then I just put that right in some water, and then I either spin it or I use a tea towel, and I just dry it in a tea towel. So I'm just going to grab a tea towel, and I'll dry it that way. And so I'll just, now I'm making 5 batches of the salsa, so I want to use a little, not quite, a little more than half for my first batch. And now if I don't have enough cilantro, I grow parsley in my garden, And so I'll add a little bit of parsley at the if I don't have quite enough cilantro. And you could do a mix, and if you don't like cilantro, then certainly substitute the cilantro with parsley. But definitely add the herbs. I see there's a little bit of some that leaves aren't so nice, so I'm just taking that off. And so you can put some of the stems in, but I like to just take the leaves for my salsa. So, but if you get a few stems in, that's okay. So then just take your cilantro and then just take your leaves off. And now this is going to take a little bit of time, so I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to chop this up. And you want to chop this up fine, and so that you have a half a cup. So I'm going to just stop here and pick up with the video when I'm ready to add the cilantro to the pot. But you know, I can start that now. I can start that cook, and if you add the cilantro in the last 4 minutes of the cook, that's fine. You don't have to add it in right at the 10-minute mark, like right before you start cooking it. You want to cook this through for 10 minutes before you can it, but you can add your cilantro in the last 4 or 5 minutes. So I'm going to pick up with the video when I'm adding the cilantro. Okay, so what I decided to do was just finish that one batch, get it in the jars, and get it into my boiling water canner. So that's what you hear over to the side. It has 7 minutes left, and then I'll be able to take those out of the pot, and then I can put these ones in, this batch in. So this is just coming up to a boil now, and so I can put the cilantro in now. And so I actually added some chopped parsley as well, and so I'm just going to stir that in. And then while that's cooking, I'm going to go chop the parsley and cilantro for the next batch. Just give that a stir, and I'll move on to the next batch. Okay, so I'm just going to fill my jars with my hot salsa. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill them so that they're within 1 inch of the top of the jar. And then I'm going to stir it down, and make sure that there's no air pockets. And then I will top the salsa so that it's within 1/2 inch from the top of the jar. So now I think I'll get in this batch 5 jars, but sometimes I get just under 5 jars, and sometimes I get a little bit more. If you have a little bit more than the batch that you're going to put in your boiling water canner, make sure that you store it in your warm oven if you're going to process it a little later, because that salsa needs to be hot, and the jar needs to be hot when you go to put it in the boiling water canner. If it's cold, then you run the risk of the jar breaking, and then your water bath will fill with salsa, and that's not fun when you have other batches of salsa to process. Never mind the loss of all that work. So it's important to make sure that your jars are warm, that your salsa is hot when you fill it, and that you have the proper amount of head space. All of those factors can play into whether your jars might break in the hot water bath. So I filled the jars to within about 1 inch. And I'm just going to stir them down, and then I'm going to add more salsa. And make sure that there's no air pockets in there. And so now I have some salsa actually in the oven from the last batch, so I'm just going to haul that out. It's hot already. And so I'm just going to top this jar with some of this hot salsa, and that way I can still process 5 jars. So I'm just going to finish filling these up to within a 1/2 inch headspace, and then I'll show you how to put the snap lids on. Okay, so I have a paper towel that's dampened with boiling hot water, and I'm just going to wipe the rims because you want to make sure that there's no salsa on the top of the rim, because that will also could affect your seal if there's some salsa or sauce on the top. So run that around, and then after you do that, if you see that you still have space, then you need to add some because you don't have quite the head space because it's settled a little bit. Then use a sterilized spoon, which I just dipped in some hot boiling water, and just add a little bit more to the top. Make sure that you have that 1/2 inch headspace. And I do. So now I'm going to add my snap lids to my hot water, and I'll let that sit in there for 30 seconds just to soften the seal. You don't want to leave it in there too long because you don't want the seal to break down, but you want it to soften. And so now I have a little bit of salsa left over, and so I'm going to stick that in my hot oven. That's at a temperature of 225, because then that'll stay warm and the jar will stay warm. And then so for my last batch, I can maybe top that up and maybe process 6 jars rather than 5. And so now my snap lids are ready to go on, and so I'll just make sure that they're centered on the jar, and then I'll take my sterilized rings out of my oven, and then I will add them to just fingertip tight. And if there's any rings that are bent, don't use them because that can affect your seal too. And so if they spin nice, that's a good sign. And just a fingertip tight. You want the air to escape the jars. That's what the purpose of the boiling water canner is. So just give that a spin, just a fingertip tight. And so now this batch is ready to go in my boiling water canner, which is at a full rolling boil. So I'll put them in the canner pot now. Okay, so my panning pot is ready to go. It's at a full rolling boil. And I'm just going to put my jars in, and I have 5 to process. So I'm going to leave 1 inch from the side of the pot and 1 inch between the jars. And now I find that the best way to keep your jars from tipping over once it starts to come up to a full boil is to add a jar in the center. And so I take an empty jar like this, and I just fill it with the water, and I put it in the center, and that helps those jars stay upright. And this is processed for 15 minutes, and so this gets quite violent in here with the boil, so it is a nice fail-safe to have that empty jar. Now make sure that jar has been in your oven and it's also hot before you put it in, or have it in the actual boiling water canner or in your canning pot and ready to go when you put your jars in. So now I'm going to put my lid back on, and now I have to wait for that to come up to a full rolling boil before I can set my timer for 15 minutes. Okay, one more thing, I just want to also add that you want to make sure when you're processing several batches that you maintain that 1 inch of water above your jars. And so I have a mark on my magnetic wand, and so this is well below, but I know I'm going to have to add one more batch of salsa to this canning pot, and I have some water already boiled. So I'm just going to add it now because it's already hot, and that way I won't necessarily have to add any water when I go to do that last batch. So now this canning pot has an indicator on it, and when it goes into the green, that means that it's at the right temperature, at the right boiling point to set the timer. But it is an indicator, and so I also look through the glass to make sure that the water is at a full rolling boil and that there is steam coming out the vents. Or if you have a traditional older style canning pot, that steam is coming out the sides, and that's an indication that your pot is at a full rolling boil. So my pot is almost there, but I still have to wait before I can start my timer. Okay, I'm almost at the end. I have my last batch of salsa in this pot. I have a batch of salsa that is in the water bath processing. The pot is about to go off, and then I have a batch of salsa in that pot that I will put into jars and then put it into the water bath to process. So all I have to do, all that I have to do for this last batch of salsa is to chop the cilantro. But it looks like my timer is going to go off momentarily, and so I'll take the jars out of the water bath, and this is what you call Cansanity. So I'm just going to get to the water bath, take the jars out, and then I'll come back and I'll chop my cilantro. Okay, so the last batch of salsa is on the stove. Hallelujah! The second last batch is in the water bath, and so I can chop the last thing that I have to chop today, and that's the cilantro for that last batch. So I have my leaves here, and then I just run the knife over like this, gather it up. You want to chop this fine so that you can get a lot of cilantro, or if you're using parsley, into your salsa. So I still have this much left, and so I'll want to use as much of that in my last batch as I can. So I'll just keep chopping until I can get that nice and fine. There. And so that looks nice and fine, and I'll just pack that into my half a cup. I'm happy that I have more room, so I'll just grab some more, and you can go a little bit more than a half a cup too. You don't have to stick to exactly a half a cup for your herbs, but you want to at least put in a half a cup. So I'll grab some more leaves and then chop those up, and once I've done that, I'll add it to my pot, and that's all I'll have to chop for today, so I'll be happy when that's done. Okay, while I'm waiting for my last batch of salsa to finish processing, I just want to show you that I put all the liquid that was drained off the tomatoes and all the cores into this pot, and I'm going to heat this up. It's late now, late at night, so I'll heat it up, I'll get it boiling, and then I'll just put the lid on, and I'll shut off my stove, and I will deal with this in the morning. And so what I like to do with the cores is I boil them down. I add maybe a cup of water to this. I boil it down, boil it for maybe 20 minutes, and then I run it through my food mill, and I add some run it through my food mill. Then I take that the liquid out after it's gone through my food mill, and I put it back on the stove and add some salt, some Worcestershire sauce, and maybe some hot sauce, and then I have a nice tomato juice, and you can can that as well. So that's for another video though, but I just want to say you don't need to, there's a lot of tomato goodness left here, and so don't throw that out. You can make a really nice tomato juice. So that's something that I will deal with tomorrow, and then The other thing that I was going to say is that when you peel your tomatoes, you have all these peels left. And so once you have the peels, you can toss this, or you can also dehydrate it. And if you dehydrate it and then grind it up, you have a nice tomato powder that you can add to soups. And so that's not, you don't have to throw that out either. And now in my bushel of tomatoes, this is what I had left. This wasn't going to be enough for another batch of salsa, and so I decided, rather than just do a half batch or a quarter batch, whatever this would come out to, I'm just going to quarter these, and I'm going to make a nice fresh pasta sauce, and I'll use that either in a lasagna or just make it for pasta. So there were some tomatoes left over from my bushel, but I decided just to keep that, and I'll use that for some fresh pasta sauce. So I'm just waiting for my last batch of salsa to be finished, and then we'll finish the video. Okay, so I'm so happy. All my salsa is out of the water bath. I ended up with 25 pints of hot salsa, medium hot salsa. And so when you add it to my 22 pints of mild salsa, that leaves me with 47 jars of salsa to enjoy throughout the winter with my family. And if you're wondering what is she going to do with all this salsa, stay tuned, because I'm going to be putting some other recipes on the website to show you how you can use salsa in your cooking. There is a fantastic recipe on the website already, black bean quesadilla, and I use a cup of salsa when I make that, and it's fantastic. My family loves it. I could make it every week and they would be thrilled. So if you haven't made that recipe yet, go check it out. It's an easy recipe to make, and it's super healthy, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Now, I have a little bit of the salsa, like almost a full jar left, that I was keeping in my warm oven, and it's still warm, and I'll pop it back in there, and I'll wait to see if all the jars seal. Now I have 2 jars left that haven't sealed, and if they don't seal within the next half an hour, I'll pop the lids off and I'll check the headspace and add some more warm salsa and reprocess it. Because I want to use this salsa throughout the winter. If you're not interested in reprocessing salsa, or you're canning that hasn't sealed, then you have to pop it in your fridge and use it up. And so I have my water still hot, so within half an hour, if they haven't sealed, then I'll take the lids off and top it off, put new rings and new lids on, and then reprocess it for 15 minutes. And so I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you are enjoying the videos, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and please go to cansanity.com and check out the recipes there and the other videos. And I also would like to say thank you to all those farmers who continue to work through COVID-19 and through the pandemic, working long hours to grow fantastic produce for us, so that we can have fantastic produce in the summer here in Canada, and we can take that produce and make fantastic salsa and preserves, and save the flavors for the winter. And so thank you for continuing to work hard through COVID-19. So I hope you've had a great time watching this video. Have a great day.